Welcome to the Nobody Told Me That podcast. My name is Teresa Duncan, and my goal is to share information that you probably weren't thinking about. I love preparing my friends for situations that may come completely out of the blue. I also want to share with you many of the tidbits I picked up over the years. If you absolutely have to tune out before the end of the show, make sure to check out the show notes for more details on today's topics and information about my online class, Dental Insurance Design and Management. And thank you so much for making me a part of your day. I'd like to give a shout out to my friends at Synergy Dental Partners for sponsoring our podcast. They know how important the admin team is to our industry. Synergy is a group purchasing organization, or GPO. GPOs reduce your overhead with lower supply costs. They also have partnerships with labs and various service providers. You owe it to your revenue cycle to check them out. They're giving Nobody Told Me That listeners a 2-month free trial and a $200 Darby credit for new Darby customers. For more information, check out the link in the show notes or go to odysseymgmt.com/synergy. Hi, welcome to another solo edition of Nobody Told Me That. I wanted to share a couple tips about going out of network. Specifically, let's call this episode Nobody Told Me About Going Out of Network. And so I'm not trying to rain on anybody's out of network parade because, quite frankly, I think if you can do it, I think it's amazing. Honestly, in order to do business your way, to be untethered, being out of network is the best way to go. Over the years, I've had many strategic calls with dentists. I've had many conversations with office managers who have gone through all of this. And so what I thought I'd do is share with you how some of these situations went off track. So this is not going to be comprehensive. I'm only going to have you for about a half hour, but I just wanted to put some thoughts in your mind if you're going through the conversation of, should I get out of network? Should I reduce my participation? This is something that every dentist across the country probably thinks about at least once a week. Maybe I should do this. And that is if you're in network. If you're out of network, you're thinking about other things, right? But when you're in network all the time, you're seeing EOBs come back in, explanation of benefits. Your team member will come up and say, hey, we have to write this off. Do you have any ideas for writing an appeal? And it just adds that extra administrative blah that you really didn't want to do. So the clinicians that are listening to this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You didn't sign up for all of this paperwork, for all of this being second guessed. I know that's what it feels like, but there must have been some reason for you to sign up. And so if you're past that reason, that's great. You got to, put some steps together and go for it. But if you are going to be in that situation, I want you to know what you're getting into. It doesn't mean it's insurmountable. It just means that you should go in with open eyes, because if you can mitigate these points that I'm going to go through, then you're going to come out okay. And you're going to maybe email me in a little bit and say, you know what, Teresa, everything was fine. You were just, kind of doom and gloom. And I'll say, that's my job. That's my job, is to make sure that you're aware of what's out there and what could potentially cause you not just headaches, but honestly, a loss of revenue. That's really what I'm focusing on, is making sure that you don't lose revenue, because what is it that you're doing? You're providing a service for the community, but you're also providing a life for your family, for yourself, and also your employees. And so I don't want anyone to not be in that situation where, things are thriving, your office is going well. So without further ado, let's go into some of the points that usually come up on strategy calls. And if you've ever been interested in having a 1-hour strategy call with me, I'll put the link in the show notes. You can certainly book a session. It's 1 hour recorded. You can have the recordings. I give you audio and video recordings, but also what I do give is clarity. And that really is what I hope this session is also going to bring for you. So if you're watching on YouTube, you already know I'm going to have some stuff in the background, some points up on the screen. But, if you're listening on audio only, you're fine. Just pay attention and you'll see. And I'll also put the summary of the points that I'll bring up in the show notes so you can go back and refresh your memory. Let's get started. So the first thing that comes to mind, and this is always the most surprising part, and that's why I'm leading with it, because if you have a very strong team who understands insurance benefits and is willing to put in some elbow grease, this isn't so bad. But the first issue you're going to run into is that patient estimates are going to become very difficult. one of the comfortable aspects of being in network is that you know what the fee schedule is. You know that it's going to pay 60% or 80%, because if it doesn't pay that, then it's going to pay zero. And now you're looking at an appeal. There's a certain bit of comfort in that. You really know going into your financial conversations what that's going to look like. So, how can it be so different? So, for my managers listening here, I'm going to speak a little bit, probably 2 or 3 years ago in your experience, but bear with me because how I'm going to position this conversation is talking to dentists who don't have a lot of insurance knowledge, and also new managers that maybe haven't had the really awkward conversations with patients about things not being covered. So let's go back a little bit in our foundational knowledge and talk about why this is such a big deal. So dentists who are not doing a lot of insurance, this is what is going to trip all of us up. When you are out of network, the carrier usually, and this is definitely more common, the policies are now being written where the benefits are very generous if you stay in network, right? So the benefits are not so great if you go out of network. Now, many plans are written, it doesn't really matter. They don't care, the benefits are the same. But in today's world where the employer wants the most for their money, you are looking at benefits being very different, tiered almost, right? So you will find that some of the out of network plans you are going to think that they're going to pay 100% or 80% of your area UCR, or perhaps even your average rate, right? But what ends up happening is sometimes the plans come back and they're actually paid at a very, very low fee schedule. It's actually not even the fee schedule that you had when you were in network. It's actually the fee schedule it's the lowest prevailing fee schedule. It's the fee schedule that's currently being offered up to anybody who decides to sign up and be a PPO provider. Well, that's problematic because you most likely have told your patients that their cleaning is going to be covered, at 100%. And if there's any out of pocket, it's not going to be that big. They're going to cover it at 100%. But that's because you were assuming that they were paying 100% of your full fee. Well, that's just not the case. So many times I see plans coming back. And in fact, one of the EOBs that I show in my live classes is a fee of $54 for a pro fee, whereas the full office fee is like $154, right? So it ends up that the patient has about $100 out of pocket, and that cleaning used to cost nothing to that patient. And so the patient is looking at you, looking at me, especially at the front office or on the phone, which is even more uncomfortable because I can't gauge how they're coming across. I can't look at body language. It's mostly just voice. And sometimes even worse is when I get a very angry email wondering what the heck is going on. So that's unfortunate. So the patient estimates, they're not going to be as accurate. They're usually going to be based on the lowest prevailing fee schedule in the area. And so what offices have to do, so if you're working currently in an office and you're coming across this and you're like, what the heck can I do? What I advise is making sure that you're tracking the fees using your practice management software and tracking the fees that are coming in, whether it's your coverage table, the fee schedule that you can update within your software. But you've got to keep track of the fees that are coming back, and you have to keep track on whether or not these plans are paying based on area fee schedules, or are they paying based on a much lower fee schedule. So one of my secrets is sending in pre-treatment estimates. Now, I know that there's a lot of you out there that are like, pre-treatment estimates, we hate them. They're a delay tactic. Well, they probably are. I mean, honestly, how many of us have sent in a pre-treatment estimate? We thought we'd get it back, and patients like, hey, I'm ready to schedule and I don't have this. I don't know how much it's going to cost. Well, today is different. We have a lot of portals where people can look up information online. So it's much faster now. I know like a lot of the insurance carriers now have these chatbots where you can put in, they know what zip code you have, and you can put in the CDT code and it'll pop out what the prevailing fee is. Well, that's very helpful. So if you are trying to gauge whether or not it's going to be a huge out of pocket or it's going to be about what you expect, just based on your fees, what I would do, just go ahead and send in a pre-treatment estimate through your clearinghouse. Go ahead and send it in for a periodic evaluation and a pro fee. You're not putting a date of service there, right? You're just asking for an immediate return. Of course, that's if you can't get that immediately through some of these chatbots, and this is what you do. But if you can get it through the chatbot, that's even better and faster, right? So send in the pre-treatment estimate. If you have a clearinghouse that doesn't return this immediately, and not all carriers do, but if if you have that, and what I would do is wait about 2 days, maybe even sooner with some of these carriers, and log on to the carrier portal and see if it's been processed yet. That will tell you whether or not it's paying at a low fee schedule or if it's going to pay based on your office fees. So that's going to give you a heads up on whether or not you need to adjust the categories down. And what do I mean by that? If you have an 80 percentile, like say 80% coverage for your fillings. So say, for example, your fillings are going to be covered at 80%, but you got this fee schedule back where it's like, it's not 80%, it's much lower. And when you do the math, it's almost closer to 40%. So what you do, you go into your coverage table and you push all of those category percentages down. So if 80% gets pushed down to 40%, you're going to push that 50% major probably down to 20, 15, or 10%, whatever you feel comfortable doing. And quite frankly, when I see a fee schedule that is much lower than what I expect, like it's kind of shocking, what I would go ahead is take a look at that patient's treatment plan and get ahead of it. Just go ahead and send it in. These pre-treatment estimates, unless it's an actual pre-authorization that's binding, which in dentistry we very rarely deal with. So confident telling you that 99.9% of the time it's a pre-treatment estimate. These pre-treatment estimates aren't binding. And I would absolutely let the patient know that, since we are in a different situation, since we're not one of the providers on your list, remember, I'm not saying preferred provider, I'm just saying we're not one of the providers on your list. I went ahead and sent in the services that the doctor was talking about. I went ahead and sent that in because I'd rather know for sure how much is going to be covered. No patient is going to be mad at you about that. So patient estimates, yes, they can become more difficult, but being insurance friendly and being patient friendly is very, very essential if you decide to go out of network. So let's talk about the next one. Well, your knowledge of the contract is going to make a huge difference here. So not just whether or not it's paying on area UCR, not anything to do with what we just discussed. So when you are taking a look at their benefits, say you go onto their portal and you look at everything, you're trying to find everything, you can go to the clearinghouse and pull up their benefits that they're going to return to you. What's even better is if the patient can bring to you the certificate of coverage. That's actually anytime that's the booklet that the patients get from the employer. So let me just make this blanket statement. Anytime that I can get what the insurance company gives to the patient, anytime I can get that, I am in a much better position because those documents have to be crystal clear for the patient. And in fact, if you've ever read any of these certificate of coverage or summary of coverage booklets, they're usually anywhere from 15 to 32 pages, 35 pages. I've never seen them go higher than 50. But what it is, it details everything that has to do with that plan, everything that you would want to know about that plan. Some of it gets distilled onto the portal and onto our benefits breakdowns, but some do not. What I'm looking for when I'm out of network is whether or not they're going to pay my office or not. So keep in mind, if you've made the decision to go ahead and collect from the patient and you're not worried about tracking down payment, then you can just do a 30 or 60-second skip on this part. But the majority of offices are planning on accepting assignment of benefits because they realize that by going out of network now, the biggest part of the payment is due by the patient, and a lot of patients just can't handle it. So if that's your situation where you accept assignment of benefits from the carrier and the patient pays their portion at the time of service or before, I'd rather have that than on the back end, then I need to know what the contract says specifically. Will they send me the check? So there is a lot of chatter out there on Facebook groups and forums that Delta never sends the check to the office if you're out of network. And that, again, it's just not true. There's a lot of absolutes running around out there in these Facebook groups. And if there is one thing I have learned, it's that there are no absolutes with insurance. Every contract can be different. And so what goes for insurance company A could go for insurance company B, and then for another patient, totally different for insurance company C. And even so, within the different carriers, huge variety of plans. So you could deal with one. I mean, we'll just bring up Delta because Delta is the one that everybody seems to think about as far as not sending you the check. Delta may send the majority of the checks to the patient, but you know what? As time goes on, patients have complained to employers and said, if you just accepted assignment of benefits because some smart cookie in a dental office told them to ask for that, which is hint, hint, you can do this too. what the employer is like, why would we not let the office get paid? The HR person puts themselves in those shoes, and they're like, why? I don't want to pay the whole thing. I would rather have the insurance company pay the patient or pay the provider the majority of the payment. So many employers are asking for payment to go to the provider. So that is turning, right? But also what's turning is you have some state laws that are starting to pass, and it's starting to gain steam where, if there is a valid assignment of benefits, then they must adhere to that. Again, keep in mind the difference is self-funded. Bigger plans typically don't have to pay attention, or actually don't have to pay attention to state law, but at least it would help with some of the fully funded plans that your state takes a look at. Okay, so what else am I looking at in the contract? Well, oftentimes in our portals and also in our clearinghouse rundowns, we don't see information about wellness plans. We don't see information about rollover maximums. We don't see information about any supplemental plans that are available to them. And it's no fault of the clearinghouses. They can only give you what is put out there, right? I've been told by carriers that much of this information is proprietary. It's specific to that employer. And so you're not going to find a lot of this stuff on the portals. Will we reach a point where the carrier is perhaps pushing information directly to the practice management system so that there is no real leakage of this information? Maybe. Wouldn't that be nice? But for now, we've still, as an out-of-network office, we still have to cobble our information together. Remember in the beginning, I said if you've got somebody who's willing to do a little bit of legwork and loves insurance, they're going to be fine. The providers who have people in office who are not knowledgeable about insurance or don't know that they can push back on certain things, that's when, unfortunately, we start to see a lot of patients getting angry because the contracts say one thing and they're being told another. Let's go back to the contract. So the information that the patient gets, like say, for example, they have rollover maximums, meaning if they go to the dentist on a regular basis, the next year they actually get a little bit more in benefits. Well, that's good for us to know whether we're in network or out of network. That typically does not show up on many of the portals. The other piece of information that's important is the appeals process. Well, when you're in network, you've got a whole appeals process that you have to adhere to because you agree to be bound to their rules. Well, when you're out of network and you have to appeal, if it's a very large employer, remember that falls under self-insured ERISA, which is governed by the Department of Labor, and nobody wants to deal with that. I've appealed to the Department of Labor and it has not been fun, right? Very, very long process. So I'm going to look and see what my rights as far as appeals and mediation are, and it's going to be found in that document. That's not going to come through on any insurance portal, and that can be specific to that particular plan. So let's break this down. If you get all this information and say you actually you've absorbed every little bit of their contract, right? Like it's just swimming around in your head and you know everything, you know what page everything is on. What I want you to do then is make sure that the patient knows that you've done your homework. Mrs. Jones, I was able to take a look at the plan benefits that you brought in. Thank you so much. It was really informative. What we were planning on doing on tooth number 15, by looking at your contract, it looks like there shouldn't be any issues with that. We have the documentation. Everything should be ready to go. I would go ahead and schedule that appointment. I'll send a pre-treatment estimate to make sure everything is okay. But just looking at your contract, I feel confident, unless they decide to not release benefits, that we're meeting all of the criteria on the plan. And so that is how I would phrase it. And I would talk in comforting tones too. And I know it sounds silly, but this is what you have to think about. Patients, when they're in front of you, are they have no idea about their benefits, and they really do look to you to translate them. So I want you to do that. I want you to be that. I call it in my classes the Rosetta Stone of insurance benefits. And then some of you are too young to know what that means. So maybe like the Duolingo or Google Translate of insurance benefits. What I want you to do is, in a tone that's comforting, let the patient know you've reviewed the documentation. I don't see why they wouldn't cover this, but we can't guarantee it. Remember, we can never guarantee it. But it looks like, according to your contract, if I submit the documentation and it looks like we have that, then there should be no problem with it being covered. But Mrs. Jones, remember, if things don't go through and for some reason they deny benefits for the crown, I'm going to call you, and that means I need your help. So I would really hate to bill this back to you. I don't think that you should have to pay for the whole thing. So when I put up the bat signal, make sure you call me back. And you can see that I said that. Maybe I stumbled a little bit, but because I wasn't planning on going to a whole role play, but I have said this enough to patients where, I'm going to take care of you. I did my homework. I think we can go forward with this together. But if not, I'm going to help you. So, here's what we're going to do. It's like, we're going to take this trip together. Here's my safety net. If I'm going to help you out, everything's going to be okay. I've done my homework. So you are going to have to understand their benefits better than they are, which is actually the case if you're in network too. So let's go to the next piece here. And this, I think, is the hardest for doctors because I'll give you an example. I was on a strategy call with a doctor, and I usually ask a couple very hard questions. And one of them, just aside from this marketing thing, one of the questions is, does your team support you? And most of the time they will say, yes, 100%. We've talked about it. That's great. Then I can continue on. But every now and then somebody will say, well, I've talked to them about it and they're really nervous, but I think they'll see what a difference it's going to make when we're able to, and it just trails off because they're justifying the reaction that they think they're going to get from their team. Unfortunately, if your team is not on board, if your team, apprehensive is one thing. I remember going out of network when I was with full time in an office, and we were nervous. I mean, we planned and planned and planned, and we were nervous. Apprehensive is one thing. Not in favor is something else. And I've heard it all across, like it's just going to be more work, or patients are going to get mad at me. Whatever it is, if you sense that this is going to be an issue with your team, it's going to be an issue with your team. And unfortunately, that is something where if I sense hesitation, we're going to have a little bit more conversation about it, because I would hate for you to go full steam ahead and plan because you're chasing this dream of freedom from the PPOs, which is exciting. But I don't want to give you false hope, because I have seen so many situations go bad when the team isn't supportive. And I got to be honest, and my office manager friends, I don't think I'm telling you anything new. You all have dealt with people like this before. It's usually one person in the office that doesn't want to change. Is it sometimes the office manager? Sure. I used to be that office manager where I didn't want to change, and I was always the problem. I was, well, yeah, we could do that, but, and I would be passive aggressive and say, I worry about this. And honestly, you will see that coming a mile away, and how you handle that. There's a lot of conversations on that, but just beware if you do have some serious opposition. So aside from the opposition of your team, the other question that I ask is, how are your referrals? How's your marketing? And I get this quizzical look because everybody comes to these calls ready to talk numbers and patients and procedure codes. And what I want to know is, how many people, when you run your referral report, how many patients are actually referring you, new patients, or is it all insurance? And if you run your referral report and it's 10, 20 deep before you get to a patient that refers more than one or two. I mean, single referrals, that's nice, but I'm looking for referral for patients who routinely send you people, or a group, like maybe you're part of the Chamber of Commerce, or maybe you're part of a social club, or you sponsor a little league team or something like that. We need more sources of referrals and new patients than the insurance companies can give you. So if you're upside down and in your top 10, it's all insurance companies, gently, very gently, I'm going to suggest to you that you need to get comfortable with the idea that you're going to spend some good money on marketing, and you're going to have to flex your marketing muscle. Is that working with a company that, you could spend a ton of money with and really blow it out? Sure. Is it working with a smaller scale company and kind of getting out there in the community? It's all different. If you go back through some of my podcast episodes, I've had marketing people on, Sean Hamill, Rita Zamora does a great job with marketing. Gary Bird has been on. There's been a couple people that I've interviewed over the years that have a lot to say about marketing. Maybe one of them will resonate, but if not, you'll get some valuable information. So go and check out those episodes. If you haven't marketed, if you haven't spent any money, it's just like any other muscle. You're not going to get used to it. It's going to hurt. Actually, what's going to hurt is spending money. Most of the time, CPAs, they want your marketing percentages to not be a huge amount of your net. And I get that. I totally get that. But you're probably going to be looking at, I'm hoping that you spent about 2 to 3% on marketing, even if you're in network, because I'm hoping you're trying to get a lot of out of network patients. But when you go out of network, going from 2 to 3% to 6, 7, 8% is really shocking. And even some of the CPAs I know, they're like, oh my gosh, that's really high. Why are you telling them to spend that much? So I'll just share that when I was early in my consulting career, I had the extreme pleasure of working with a bunch of startup companies and startup offices, and they were so much fun. The energy in a startup is so different. In fact, my friend Michelle Affinato and my two friends, Michelle Affinato and Malika Azargun, actually, they specialize in startups, right? And they have a podcast called accelerate your dental practice. I think that's the name of it. It's in my podcast player, so it just automatically downloads. But they come at it from a startup point of view. Many of you have worked as a startup, right? You remember those days. What I want you to think about is the energy, the excitement that you spent. You had thoughts about where you wanted to spend your money. You really sat down and thought about your area, your neighborhood, your patient population, and you decided where best your money would be spent. I'm just going to urge you to go back and recapture some of that energy. Start thinking again like a startup, because that's the energy you're going to have. Your muscle will get stronger, and you might, who knows, you might tap into the mother lode of one company that sends you everything. That's great. Part of your marketing muscle is also deciding whether or not you're going to offer a membership plan. And I was always on the fence of, should I make this a permanent part of offices that a permanent recommendation. And as time goes on, I think I'm at that point now. I've looked at so many different membership companies. There are some that are fantastic, some are not. You're going to have to do your due diligence, because, there's some that I'm certainly happy to recommend. You can email me and I'll send you those names. I don't get anything for them. Sometimes they sponsor my classes, sometimes they don't. But what I think is really important here is that if you look at other offices in your area, do they have a membership plan? Because remember, not everybody has insurance, and not everybody has great benefits, even with the insurance. And so it's really important, I think, to offer an alternative. And I also think it's just good for the community that you have an alternative for them. So having a membership plan, I think, is part now of your marketing decision, whether or not you handle it in-house or whether or not you hire a company to do it. Selfishly, when I was full-time in an office, we didn't have membership plans back then. I mean, I know I've been out a long time. We didn't have membership plans back then. But had we had them, I think I would have tried to handle it myself, because as power office manager, I think I can do everything. I think I can keep track of everything. Nothing's going to get by me. Now I know better. I know that I would outsource that as fast as I can. These companies now come with their own marketing flyers, social media posts. They come with support. They come with education. And my biggest fear, I'll be very honest with you, doctors, my biggest fear is that we expect a lot from our admin teams and they burn out. So, if you're sitting there and you're like, my admin team barely does anything, you're not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the admin teams that are hustling and going crazy, because every fire that happens in the office, while you're in the back with your assistant and hygienist and the heads are down and you're in the mouths, we're the ones that have to run around everywhere and fix things. And so I have seen since COVID, not necessarily because of COVID now, but started with COVID, I've seen more of my very good office manager friends decide, forget it. They got out of the office, started billing companies, or just retired from dentistry in general. And I don't want that to happen. Nowadays, dentistry is growing up into being an adult business, right? Many times for a business to succeed, if you don't have the manpower, you outsource. And this and payroll, probably the very first things that I would outsource. Payroll, 100%. Payroll is just a pain. And luckily, I didn't have to handle it all that much. And the times that I did, I was very happy to give it back to the dentist. So not a fan of payroll, really a fan of your financially smartest employees being able to do fantastic financial things in your office. They can't do it when they're running around with their hair on fire. I've tried it. I have absolutely tried it. So that's number 3, that your marketing muscle is pretty weak. And so I'm going to wrap it up here with the very 4th piece of information here. And this is going to hurt a little bit. And I swear I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer, but what I want to be is real with you, because I think that's what a lot of you expect from me. I want to keep this really honest. This hurt me the most when we decided to go out and network. And I know it hurt my dentist a lot. Just a reminder to check out the companies who support the show. My friends at Synergy Dental Partners are offering 2 free months to try out their lower prices for labs, supplies, and select software services. To sign up, visit odysseymgmt.com/synergy, and the link is also in the show notes. We had patients who we had seen them get engaged, couples get engaged, get married, have kids. We had seen that whole life cycle. We had seen people move into the area and bring so many of their other friends. And when you go, you can't help it. This is what you do. You go and you take a look at all of the people that are on the list of the carrier you're planning to drop. And you start in your head saying, they're not going to leave. Oh, they'll be here forever. They love us. They love me, all that stuff. That's great. And it's probably true for most of them. but you are going to have one or two that are going to say, I just can't, I have to go, and there's nothing you can do about it. Man, that was painful. I can think of the one family, the husband was a pilot. I can't say too much, but the husband was a pilot. She was amazing. Kids were just amazing. And even though he was a pilot, good money, right? Good insurance. She worked from home, and they had all these kids they had to send to college. And I remember her saying to me, we can't afford to go out of network. We have to do this with medical, and we can't do it. And then you start having the urge to, okay, well, what about if we just, give you this discount and this discount? And then you start thinking, what am I doing? So you're going to lose some. You're going to lose some, and it's going to hurt. Will you get them back? Maybe. Mostly. That is the good thing. And for those of you who are, you've got your out of network friends chirping in your ear, that is true. A lot of times the patients do come back. But I am very cautious telling you that you're going to keep 80-90% of your patients. I have not seen that, even with the most prep. I have not seen that be the norm. So I haven't seen 40 or 50% be the norm either. But I think it's hard for you to say, okay, we were run really well. We're going to be okay. There's a lot of other factors that you have to think about. Is your administrative team on board? That's why I talked about it. Are you comfortable asking patients to refer other patients? Because that's part of that marketing muscle that you haven't flexed in a while. You're going to have to ask for referrals from your existing patients. The good news is you can ask your good patients to send you people. You don't have to ask those awful patients to send you people, right? Like the goal is to get them out of the office. You can start doing marketing that you really want to do, but you are going to lose some patients. And in my experience, I've seen it be about, 1.5 hygiene cycles, maybe 2 hygiene cycles where they maybe like this office or this family I was telling you about. So let's just call her Lynn. So Lynn would say to me, okay, well, we can't afford to stay in network, so we're going to go. So Lynn would go to her appointment and at a new office. So she had to meet a new team and she doesn't like them. Okay. So I'm just going to give you the scenario. She doesn't like them. She's used to us. And so she stays because the cleaning's covered at 100% and she's got pretty decent teeth anyway. So it's not like she's got to go and get a ton of crowns. Well, what happens when she does have to have at least one filling done or something, or maybe the kids, so she's bringing the kids in. Then when the treatment happens, it sort of reinforces that she really misses us. Maybe there's not a great experience. Basically what I'm saying is the difference between her experience with you and the experience at this new office is just highlighted. Maybe the new office is amazing. It's just not you, right? Maybe the new office is terrible. That's great. Maybe they come back sooner. But there has to be that feeling of loss that the patient feels by not coming back to you. Now, if they don't have that loss, all we can do is continue to market to them via newsletter, postcards, whatever. But if they have that little bit of loss, it's going to stick with them. And then the next time they come in, then they're going to say, you know what, this is ridiculous. Let me just call. So it's really important for you when you see that patients aren't coming back for their recare or for their appointments after they've gone out of network, you need to stay in touch with them for the first 2 years, maybe even 3 years. You need to stay in touch with them. Maybe it's a matter of sending them little postcards with like a crying caricature of, we miss you, let us know how you're doing, whatever it is. Remember, patients change insurance all the time, but they also, what you're doing is you're feeding into that feeling of loss. Is it a little manipulative? Yeah, but you know what? I like my patients. I want them back. And I think that's how you feel too. So yes, some of your favorite patients will leave. The good news is some of your not so favorite patients are also going to leave. So, you take the good, you take the bad, all that kind of stuff. So there is some good and bad with all of this. But what I would like for you to do is really figure out what you're going to do, what is possible for you to stomach, because you're the one who's going to have to decide if you're ready to make this change. And I'm talking here to the managers in the room as well. Between you and the doctor, your team is going to take their cues from how you are. Now, if you're very frustrated with the change, they're going to be frustrated. If you're very optimistic, they're going to be optimistic. They're going to take their cues from you. So do your homework. We can always jump on a strategy call. I'll put the link in the show notes. But most importantly, I just don't want you to be in a situation where this is blindsiding you. And I feel like just from comments that I've read, I had one doctor in a class come up and tell me, I had no idea about this difference in paying, full fee or paying on a low fee schedule. And I just feel like at some point that should have come up in somebody's conversation, whether or not it was with a colleague or with a consultant or, a speaker. I really hate when you are in situations where you could have avoided it. And that's, of course, why I named the podcast Nobody Told Me That, because I don't want you to ever be in that situation. So that being said, this is the end of my solo conversation with you. I'll put some resources in the show notes for you, and you can certainly welcome to check out my other podcast, Chew on This. I don't know if you're aware that we have sort of a comedic podcast, Kevin Henry and I. We kind of do a take on the news. And then I want to remind you all that I do have a pretty busy calendar for speaking. So if you ever feel like finding out where I am in the country, my events page has all that information, but I'm giving a ton of webinars between now, actually starting now. I mean, I've got some live speaking, but I've got so many webinars set up. So there's always a good chance that you'll be able to register for some and then play it back later. I don't know if you're like me, but I tend to not watch webinars live anymore just because I can't. And so now I've got this like stockpile of webinars that I have to watch. I have playing on a second monitor on the side to catch up. And I know my friend Rita Zamora, she's the same way. We just have this, like, we talk about like, oh my gosh, how deep are your webinars now? So, and then the other piece is I hope that you really sit down and plan this out. Like, if you're going to do it, really sit down, do the pros and cons. And, and if you decide to do it for the right reasons, not because you're emotional and angry at an insurance carrier for denying something. I get it. Please don't think I don't get it. I totally get it. But I want you to do it because it's going to make economic sense for you. And it's also going to lead to a better quality of practice life for you and for your team. Getting out of network and making life exponentially harder because of stuff you weren't aware of before just doesn't seem like it's fair to you and to your patients. So I always super appreciative of the time that you spend with us. I'll see you at the next episode.
We're all super busy, so thank you for making time for me today. The show notes will have any links that we referenced in the episode. You can also find links for my book, events, and my online insurance course, Dental Insurance Design and Management. I speak often around the country on management and insurance issues. Come hang out with me in one of my classes. I promise you'll laugh and learn.